Jacob Collier is one of the world's most talented musicians. There's no denying his musical genius. He can create ideas out of anywhere. He's famous for a reason. He's charismatic. He's got such brilliance inside, and the world can really tell how musically gifted he really is. But he's also very polarizing, and that's such an interesting thing to think about. When someone can make music, because it's such a subjective thing, making music, there are so many ways we could personally approach our art, right? And so there seems to be quite a divide in the way Jacob Collier makes music. There's a huge majority of people who love what he does, will lap up anything he does because it really is just so cool and brilliant. Whereas there's another group of people who personally don't enjoy it as much. They see it as, maybe trying too hard, or it doesn't really resonate in a lot of ways. And so I want to kind of share with you my personal thoughts on Jacob Collier's approach and why I kind of disagree with it, and how I personally think about making music. And again, this is not to throw any shade at Jacob Collier. Like, he's leagues more famous than I am and will ever be. He deserves all the credit he gets. Everything he puts out there, all the success he has, it's absolutely deserved. I just want to share an alternative viewpoint and why maybe we don't feel the need to match up to certain standards. Maybe we see the most popular artists and the way they do things, and we think, oh, if we copy what they're doing, then we can get the same results. And I want to share with you that doesn't have to be the case, right? You can be truly authentic to yourself, and you can get great results from that. And I think that's a great place to start, is that Jacob Collier is entirely authentic to himself. He will never be the one to say, oh, I'm trying to copy this person or this person. No, actually, if you listen to any of his pieces, it actually sounds like Jacob Collier. He has his own distinct musical style. The way he outputs is a very brilliant way of engaging with his audience, but also musically, you can hear all the complexities and intricacies within his music. So you can never fault him for being authentic. Or for being inauthentic, I guess you should say. He seems entirely authentic in what he does, which is super, super cool, and it inspires so many, musicians, composers, producers to actually make music out of their laptops, which is so, so cool. And I think where I personally disagree is just the actual approach of making music that resonates with people. I think at the end of the day, we both have, and most composers, I guess, would say, we all have the same end goal of creating music that impacts, touches people, touches them in a small way, perhaps even impacts them in a deeper way. We all want that with our music, right? But the way we get there can be completely different, and there's a stark contrast there. So that's, I think, where we kind of differ in our approaches. So the way I think about it is, Jacob loves to experiment, and a lot of his musical style is based on discovering new things and incorporating those devices into his music. And a lot of the times, it just sounds like you're taking on this huge exploration of all these different sounds and colors and things like that. And it's just a whirlwind of music, essentially. And I think for me personally, sometimes I can tend to get a little bit lost in the journey, just because there's a lot of techniques happening, and I find myself maybe overanalyzing some of the things that he's doing. Because as a musician, I want to learn what he's doing. Like, it's actually interesting. But at the same time, as a listener, as a casual, maybe layperson experiencing his music for the first time, it could maybe alienate me to a degree where I feel like, oh, I don't really know what's going on. It's not really touching me in here, right? It's not really making me feel this deep, maybe nostalgic or emotional connection to what the lyrics are, or maybe what the chords are supposed to put out. And so there's maybe that degree of separation that we tend to feel as listeners when we don't have that same understanding of what he does in his own music. And that's why I say, like, people's music can be polarizing, because I feel like what people don't naturally understand, they tend to feel maybe not afraid of it, but they don't tend to respond to it quite as deeply. Whereas when something feels more comforting, personal, or intimate, or nostalgic, we tend to resonate with that a little bit more, right? There seems to be that warmer, sort of comforting, familiar feeling, which is sort of what I try to do with my music. And the way I personally write is I sort of live by the 80-20 rule. And I was even doing this before I thought about the 80-20 rule. But essentially, most of the music that I write is based in traditional, maybe you could say classical techniques, but basically musical devices that have been used for a long period of time, for decades and centuries, that work, And then the final 20% is where I like to throw in a little bit of spice and exploration. Maybe it's a different color chord, an extended harmony here or there, just to make it feel a little bit unexpected, right? So you have 80% of traditional classic devices being used, but that final 20% is the additional spice on top that makes things stay fresh, it keeps the listener's interest, and it makes the entire thing feel just more exciting, you know? And so I wouldn't call it exactly minimalist, but I guess you could put it that way, where I try not to overcomplicate what I'm writing. Like I try to write with mainly memorable themes, with supportive harmonies that create that context behind the themes and the melodies, telling the story just through the melodies and harmonies. And then I really want the arrangement to bring the entire piece to life, right? And if you listen to my music, you've watched my channel for any length of time, you probably know that that's the way I like to do things. Whereas on the flip side, we have Jacob, who at times it feels like he's throwing the kitchen sink into his music. And again, it can create some really experimental, really, really cool results. And I think I've heard people say, like, he is the musician for musicians, right? He's the type of musician where you go through his music, you analyze every little device of what's happening. And Jacob will put up Logic session breakdowns of his tunes, which is so cool to see, because he literally talks about the layering techniques, the sound design, all the processing he does to make the music sound the way it does. And it's just a very, very generous way to share his workflow. And a lot of people relate to that, they appreciate that, and I do as well. But I think just in terms of the music making process, he leans more towards the maximalist side, where he wants to put as much as he can into the music to really, you know, lift it to that upper dimension. Whereas I sort of take the opposite approach, where I prefer to make music just based on simpler themes, simpler chord progressions, but with a hint of spice and variance thrown into it as well. So it's a little bit intriguing, and I wanted to make this video because I was just thinking the other day, like, it's so cool how, you know, we want the same end result. We want to create music that influences people, that touches people, that's, you know, catchy, that people remember. But there are so many ways to do that. And so I guess the lesson, I guess, if I want to share something at the end here, is that whatever style of music you want to make and however you want to make that, just embrace that. Because as soon as you start trying out new methods that you may not click with, but you force yourself to take those methods, it starts to feel a little bit inauthentic, and it starts to feel like a chore. And you might actually fall out of love of making music, and that's something we never want to experience, right? So however you want to make music, however the music turns out, you should stand behind it, you should be proud of it, and then maybe every subsequent piece of music you make in the future naturally gets better and better as you continue to refine your workflow, you discover new ideas and influences, and then you start to refine your toolkit and add new things to your toolbox that you can implement into your music. But I would always continue to stress that less is more. So if you have a single idea, maybe it's a melodic phrase or an A section that's really, really strong, don't feel like you have to overcomplicate it with additional notes in the melody or lots of different complicated chords. In fact, the simpler the melody can be while standing on its own, the better, in my opinion. So that's kind of what I wanted to leave you with here today. Just embrace your workflow and your style and go with it, okay? So I hope that was helpful. If you're interested in some free resources to help you take your music even further, I have it down below in the description box. In fact, my free workshop, The Complete Composer's Framework, literally goes through step by step on how to technically take your ideas and create a piece of music, like a full polished track from start to finish, and I explain every single step along the way. So if you want to check that out, it's the first link in the description there, and I hope it's valuable to you as you continue along your musical journey. So I appreciate you watching, thank you so much, and I'll catch you in the next video. See you soon.